The purpose of today's coaching call is to cover the entire PMP in the minimum possible time. So we will go through all the things that are necessary for your PMP exam preparation.
Recording in progress.
Along the way, the biggest ground rule is that if you have any question, put it in the chat box. Put the question in the chat box so that I can answer it later on. I have made 3 people as co-host. I guess Atif is co-host, Rafi is co-host, and some other people are also co-host. Whoever is coming, please let them enter in the room and we can start. So this is basically our tradition. After every batch, we do an overall class. The purpose of overall class is to explain the entire PMP in less than 2 hours. So everyone, please mute yourself. If you have question, put in the chat box or wait till the end. Or basically after every topic, I will open the session for question answer. You can ask then, or you can put it in the chat box. Okay, starting now. The most important thing that we need to understand is why even projects are needed. Why do even do we project? Projects need the most important thing. Why do we need project? So we perform need assessment. Now need assessment is proposed by business analyst. Now need assessment can be requirement of the organization, a new product, a change in the situation. For example, with the COVID, now more and more organizations are moving to other type of organization. They are moving from actually predictive to a hybrid organization. So why the project is needed? It can be a legal requirement, it can be a customer request, you want to upgrade your system, so many other things that can basically cause the need assessment. So once a need has occurred, then what do? You make a business case out of it. Now a very important thing to understand here, very important thing to understand here, that in business case, when you are writing the business case, it can be of multiple projects. Business case can be for multiple projects. Project A, project B, project C. There can be multiple projects for the business case. In order to handle that, you have options. Option A, option B, option C, option D. Okay. For the projects, we can have multiple options. Now, all these options are actually projects with their cost to benefit analysis. All those things will be there. So which type of projects to use? So once you are thinking of that, okay, which projects to be used? One of the key to use any project becomes cost and cost to benefit, or you can say benefit to cost, IRR, net present value, and opportunity cost. All those financial measures will be there to see what type of benefits you can get, what is the thing that you need to measure in the project. All those things will be there. So you select one of the option, according to that, and then you make your benefit management plan. Now benefit management plan basically yes.
There are comments from the participants like
Yeah, I can see that. Basically, when I'm writing on it, now you can see the board, na? Now you can see the board, na? It, because of artificial intelligence of Zoom, it get dim and dark. I tried to working on it. I explained this to Atif and Madhya, also to you before, that this get dims and dark along the way. But that's why I'm explaining it. Even I'm not typing, I'm explaining all those things, na? So need assessment, business case, benefit management plan, and as a result of all those things, what do you get? You get your project charter. Now guys, project charter is the most important document in your project. Project charter says that what is your project, what is the limitation of your project, what is the start date, what is the end date, what are the milestones. Everything is mentioned in the project charter. Everything is mentioned in the project charter. Who is the project manager? Who is the project sponsor? Key stakeholders and all those things. Is this clear? Need assessment, business case, benefit management plan, then you go and you make project charter. Once the project charter is approved, you can go ahead with your project. Guys, is this clear to everyone? You can type in the chat box, this is clear, otherwise we can, okay. Because I am standing, I can see the chat box, so that would be better if you can write down in the chat box. Okay, clear. Now, once the project charter is written, a very critical steps comes there. You need to communicate this charter to key stakeholders. You need to communicate this charter to key stakeholders. If you don't communicate the charter to key stakeholders, they will never know what are their responsibilities. Those key stakeholders were also involved in writing down the charter. So now when you are working with the charter, you need to inform them, hey, these are your tasks, this is a timeline, you need to work on this thing. So what does this mean? That most of the key stakeholders are already identified in project charter, already identified in business case and benefit management plan. So as a project manager, since it is your responsibility, this is your biggest responsibility, that you need to satisfy the stakeholders. You need to satisfy the stakeholders. If you don't satisfy the stakeholder, then there is no story, then there is nothing at all. So what do you need to do? First, once the charter is made, you communicate it to the key stakeholders. You go and make your stakeholder register. How you are making your stakeholder register? You go through your OPS. What are the organizational process assets? Like what are the policies, procedures? Do you have any kind of lesson learned? That lesson learned can tell you, okay, for this kind of particular project, you have particular stakeholders and all those things. So you go through your OPS and see who are these stakeholders. And the second most important thing that can affect it, enterprise environmental factors, EF. How do you gonna communicate? Which communication system you are gonna use? What type of resources are available? Do you have any preferences of resources? All those things will be mentioned in EF. Apart from that, of course, you have project charter, agreements and all those things. Guys, very important thing to remember. In the current PMP, you will not be asked what are the inputs, what are the outputs and all those things. But it does make sense that you must know how this document is formed. For example, if we are making a stakeholder register, you must know what is stakeholder register. Why do we even need that? Stakeholder register is a document that lists all the stakeholders. Not important. All the stakeholders. So you take what happens here? So the step, I would even say that journey of stakeholder. Let's put it this. So what happens? Step number 1, you see, okay, so we need to identify the stakeholders. We need to identify the stakeholders. How do you do that? I just explained through OPS, all those documents. You identify the stakeholders. Then you put them into the stakeholder register. You put stakeholder into stakeholder register. Once you put them into the stakeholder register, the next and most important thing is classify them. What is their power? What is their interest? Where do they fall? What is their power? What is their interest? Where do they fall? Classification of them. Once you have classified, okay, this is high power, high. I need to always make him happy. I need to monitor him closely. Okay, this is someone who has high power but low interest. I need to keep him satisfied. This is someone who needs information, and these are someone who needs to be put on the watch list. What do you do? Then what do you do? Very important thing. Then you make stakeholder engagement matrix. This is just one example of power interest matrix. Instead of power interest matrix, you can also have salience model, you can have stakeholder cube and all those things. So that very important thing also about that. So you make stakeholder engagement matrix showing what is the current engagement level of stakeholder, how much he is engaged. For example, for today's class, I specially made a video for batch 10 and I send it into a group, as well as I send it that video individually to everyone. Yes or no? What I was doing? I was ensuring that all my stakeholders are properly informed. And then what did I do? I went through my one-to-one students. I called my one-to-one student and made sure that they are coming there. Then I went to the PMP aspiring group and all the people, like more than 100 people, I have sent message, video, or all those things. What I was ensuring? I was ensuring that all my stakeholders, their current engagement level, unaware, resistant, neutral, sporting, leading, their current engagement level and my desired engagement level remains the same. And in order to change the stakeholder engagement, we make stakeholder engagement plan. The purpose of stakeholder engagement plan is only and only one thing, that is to ensure that all stakeholders are properly satisfied. That is to ensure that all stakeholders are satisfied. Atif, do tell me, I turned a big light off. Now is it more visible?
Yes, this is good.
I turned the biggest light off. Okay, so
I
now
guess that was the reflection.
maybe. So you get stakeholder engagement plan and all those things. So sometimes I would say less is better instead of more. Okay, so this is how I'm ensuring stakeholder. Again, I turned the light off. Although I know I am looking black and all those things, but you guys can see what is happening here. That is stakeholder engagement. Now, how do you do stakeholder engagement? This is very important. You have to communicate to them. 4R. Right information at right time to right people at the right time. Right information to right people at right time to have the right impact. So guys, if you understand these 4Rs, everything else becomes extremely easy for you. If you understand what 4Rs are, 4R means that you have a right information which you want to give to the stakeholders, and at right information, right time, to right people to have right impact. Whatever you want to call, I don't care. Whatever the 4R means, I don't care. The purpose is that you give the information to the people. You make a plan, communication plan, in which it is written that okay, this person needs this information and you need to make sure this information gets to that person on that time. So we made a communication management plan in which all these things are written properly, in which all these things are written in black and white. Who is authorized to share the information? What does the information contain? How the information can be shared? How to handle that information? If this information get lost, what to do? And all those things. So you make a communication management plan. And communication management plan is not just for stakeholders. Yes, the primary purpose of communication management plan is to communicate to the stakeholders, but it's the communication management plan who will decide the entire information in the entire project. So we have gone through things like project charter, we have gone through communication management plan, we have gone through stakeholder engagement plan. If you have any question, now please ask. Then we will move to the next thing. So if anyone has any question, they can either type or they can ask. Yes, please. Okay, Hussain, it is clear to you. I can see
Yeah.
that. Yes, please.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, Abhi, I can hear. Yes, I can hear. Please speak.
My question is that you have said that you need to stakeholder plan, communication management plan, and other subsidy management plan. What are the sequence of preparing those plans? I mean, which plan you need to be initially prepared, then it should be integrated.
Very good question, and a question that actually comes from the real project manager. So let me just put in the context for everyone. He is actually a real life project manager. So he asked a very good question here. In my opinion, the first plan you need to make is you need to make communication management plan. In my opinion, that you need to make a communication management plan, how to communicate, and then along the way the plans get upgraded. Some people think that scope, schedule and cost, which will come later on, these need to be done, but in my opinion, communication plan need to be done first, and then we move along the way. Because initially it was said, okay, scope, schedule, costs are the most important thing. No, 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 no. The job of a project manager is 90% communication. So that's why he need to focus that. Then he needs to focus on stakeholder engagement plan. That's why we have stakeholder register even in the initiation. I hope, sir, that answer the question.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah, I got, and I actually wish to share my experience.
Sure.
Because you have rightly said that communication management plan, because you have to share those all information within the stakeholder.
Mhm.
Initially, what I feel that stakeholder register, preparation of a stakeholder register with the help of the project charter, where you have all the highlights of the high level stakeholder and risk management, and then after risk management plan, because all the cost, schedule, management, all are dependent on the risk, because the schedule will be definitely depending on the risk management plan. It may be and resource management plan and quality management plan, and obviously very important that is procurement management plan.
Sure.
So I agree with you that the communication management plan comes initially, because you have to communicate and bring all the stakeholder on one page, and their engagement is very important. Obviously through communication.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So, Rohit, project charter is created by, actually it is created by business analyst, but we say that it is created by sponsor, because sponsor is the person who write down on the project charter. Actually, in practical sense, it is created by business analyst in the support of all the team, but the person who is signing is a sponsor, so we say that sponsor created it. Thank you. Now coming to the next thing, and a very important thing. Now, Tuckman ladder. I'm coming to the topic resource, or as the new PMI content says, team. It's the same meaning, resource or team. So resource or team are very important thing. How does the resource comes? For me, everything comes under Tuckman ladder, and I really love the concept of Tuckman ladder. Okay, so what is this? This is time, and this is productivity. What happens in the start? Okay, what happens in the start? In the start, when the team is coming, everyone is new, everyone try to give their best. Everyone tries to give their best, but individual effort is always individual. So they give their best in the forming stage. Now, in the forming stage, the role of a project manager is very critical. The role of the project manager is more of a directive nature. He is giving direction, do this, do that, do this, do that. Working on the team charter. Team charter is a document that defines the ground rules of the team. Now, from team to team, like as a project manager, I prefer that team make their ground rules themselves. But when the team is coming new in the forming stage, the project manager can either write down the initial ground rules, and then the team can modify it, final it. But something, ground rules or working agreement must be there, maybe an initial draft must be there for the team to work on. Then we have values, vision, mission, how to handle the conflict. All those things are mentioned in the team charter, a very, very important document. And here we are also deciding whether we need a virtual resources, a very important topic in the current PMP. In current PMP, virtual teams are getting more and more questions, and reason is very clear. Why? Because nowadays most of the teams are working in virtual team. It makes sense, na? Since we are working in a virtual teams, right now we are doing a virtual training, all those things. And I actually love virtual more than the real, because it gives you the opportunity. Like for example, I know most of the people will disagree with me. If you are working, if you are actually performing it in person, right now we have people from Karachi, we have people from US, we have people from Canada, we have people from all over the globe. It is never possible if it's not a virtual team. So virtual team has its own advantages and disadvantages. Disadvantages, as we have seen, that the light was not enough initially, you guys cannot see, I have to turn 2 lights off, and then it became more visible. So virtual teams has its challenges. The thing that really happened right now is the challenge of virtual team. So understand this thing, that how virtual team can happen, what are their challenges, and do you need physical resource or virtual resource. This is decided in the forming stage. So now let's say we have whatever resources we have, we got all those resources and try to have them co-located so that we can have an osmotic communication. Okay, so that we will have osmotic communication. The team is there, the forming stage is going very good. Okay, now after some time, when the walls, that initially when you meet you say hello, how are you, but slowly you don't become that formal. Things starts to happen, clashes start to happening, and then a stage comes known as storming stage. You are wrong, no, you are wrong, you are right. In PMP exam, you may not get a direct question from Tuckman, although you can get a question regarding that, but very importantly, you will get a question regarding conflict management, or the two teams are fighting, what is their stages of conflict, very important thing. So in storming, the team is fighting, so of course the role of the project manager here becomes more of a coach, and the most important skill he needs is active listening. Okay guys, one more thing, which marker is more effective that you can see, black, red or blue? So I will use that one more. Write down in the chat box which marker, which color is more effective to see easily. I will write down that color. Okay, red, blue. So all three colors are there. Okay, so here the role of the project manager is more of a coaching. He needs to listen to the team, he needs to listen them. Now I will share a video about active listening, a very important thing. How do you do active listening? When someone is speaking according to the culture, you can look into the eyes. If your culture does not allow that you listen, you look into their eyes. For example, my culture does not allow, if I am talking to even Abu Sadi, he's he's senior to me, let's say. So when I'm talking to him, I will not look into his eyes. Okay, if you are not looking into us, okay, but you need to give 100% attention to the person what they are saying. 100% attention is the key, and you can use the words and you can rephrase. Okay, what I am hearing is this, you want to say that this is the important. Okay, so this means this is the important. Using those words, rephrasing, paraphrasing and listening keenly becomes active listening. Then let's say the conflict is there, the thing comes to identify the first thing, the level of conflict. Why do we identify level of conflict? Because once you know level of conflict, then you know should you even be involved into that conflict or no need. Should you be even involved into that conflict or there is no need? So let's go. Number one, so write down in the chat box what do you think are the 5 level of conflict. Number 1 is disagreement. Now disagreement is that team members are not agreeing, okay, on something and they are trying to solve the problem. Okay, they are trying to solve the problem. Okay, once we move from the problem to be solved, disagreement, then we move to the next level, that is more of a contest, then we have crusade, and then we have world war. The first one is problem to be solved. In problem to be solved, the team is working to solve the problem. So if the problem is not solved there, then we go to the disagreement stage. I don't agree with you. Your team starts fighting here. If the conflict is not handled at this stage, this is the ideal stage to tackle the conflict. If the conflict is not handled at this stage, then it goes to contest. Contest means I win, you lose. I win, you lose. Then the next step becomes crusade. We care more about our team goals than about the project goals. And the last one is world war. World war means we don't care about that team can die, the project can destroy, we don't care at all. What we care, are we winning or losing? We only care about our personal goal. So as a project manager, what is your strategy for each level? If the team is at world war, For example, I cannot see his face. If I start seeing him, I'll start fighting him. And both resources are so important, you cannot fire anyone, or both are very important. What do? You separate the two resources, maybe into two separate rooms, two separate buildings, and you try to use diplomacy to de-escalate the issue. Here we need to de-escalate the issue. Try from World War, try to get it to crusade, where they don't want to kill other or destroy other, they are just looking for their group. Then from there, maybe use Delphi technique to get the consensus, try to get it to contest, and then disagreement, and then problem to be solved. Very important, if the team is at this stage, problem to be solved, the project manager should not interfere. Let the team work on itself. Let the team work on itself. Okay, once you have identified the conflict, then we have to see how to handle the conflict. Now, if we care about other people, let's say care for others and care for oneself. If you care highly for other people and you care highly for yourself, you get 4 metrics there. What do? You try to get a win-win situation. I care for the other party and I care for myself, so I want to have a win-win situation. I want to solve the problem. For win-win situation, we have problem solving. We need to solve the problem. We have collaboration. We have confronting. We confront the issue. Instead of running away, we try to solve the issue. If we don't care about ourselves, or we don't have courage, and we don't care about others, then we avoid the problem or withdraw. The worst thing that can happen. This is a lose-lose situation. This is the lose-lose situation. If we only care for ourselves, we don't care about others, what do we try to do? Simple thing. We try to do forcing or directing. It's a win-lose situation. Now, if we care too much about other person that we are trying to accommodate, then it becomes lose-win situation. Lose-win situation, where we try to accommodate other person or even smoothing. In between, there is also compromise. Compromise is a very, I would say, useful situation in conflict management. After like collaboration and confronting, I recommend compromise. Why? In compromise, both parties are moving a little away from their situation. Both are giving up their original scenario and maybe coming out of the box solution, something that they have to give up both of the things, and in which in this way most of the time both parties can be satisfied. So you get a compromise in between. Okay, if you handle conflict management properly, then after storming phase we get norming. Things are getting normalized, but still if you get a problem, the problem comes back to the real case. You need to understand here. So here the role of the project manager is more of a mentoring, and then comes the ideal stage, performing. When the team is working good, then the project manager needs to set aside, let the team work, and delegate the task to the team. Let them work. Very important. Okay, and of course every team like move away to their own section, so we get adjourning. Okay, sometime also known as morning. Forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, but in order to make it rhyme, some people also called it as morning. Okay, so at adjourning, again you need to coach people because they are sad, people are going, and all those things. So that's all about resource in one page. I hope this journey of resource is clear to you. Another important thing to understand when you are getting the resources is when you are handling the resources, very important thing is to understand how people are motivated. Every human being is motivated by different things. For that we have Maslow hierarchy of need. Maslow hierarchy of needs says that when lower needs of people are satisfied, then they will ask for better needs. Let's say if I am unable to breathe here, someone like actually made me choked or I am choking, I will not care about anyone. I will not care about how the presentation is going, how everything is going. I will care about only one thing. my ability to breathe. When I am breathing, then I will care about other things. Okay, AC is working, the light is okay, people are understanding me. How can I give value? And so on, up to creativity and understanding the purpose of this life. So Maslow hierarchy needs, unless the basic needs are not satisfied, we will not even look after the other things. Then we need to understand Herzberg theory of motivation of 2 point. Like there are two things, let's say A and B. There are few things that if they are not present, people will get demotivated. But no matter how much you provide them, they will be not motivated to take action. For example, let's say you don't have AC, you do not have light. If you have ever faced the load shedding problem or electricity problem, as long as the electricity is coming, no one notices it. It does not motivate you to take an action. No. But if it is not present there, then you become demotivated. So they are basically known as hygiene agents. Salary comes under that. Actually, your job security and all those things comes under. If they are present, you take them for granted. They don't motivate you. If they are not present, then you get demotivated. So no matter how much more electricity is coming, you will not be motivated to take action. Same goes for your salary. I choose the example of electricity as compared to salary because most of the time, whenever I give the example of salary, students disagree. No, sir, give us more money, we will be motivated. No. Money never motivates you. Okay, the second thing become motivating factors. The B thing. Now, motivating thing is opportunity, learning, growth, appreciation. Okay, appreciation. If you are appreciating, if you are seeing your growth, then you are motivated to take action. Herzberg theory of motivation. Then we have theory X, McGregor theory X and theory Y. Theory X says that you continuously need to monitor the people, otherwise they will not work. And theory Y says that if you provide good environment to the people, people will work. We also have theory Z. Theory Z says that people love to work, give them a good environment and let them do the job. Okay, that comes in between X and Y, the Z theory. But Pembroke 6 says about theory X and theory Y. Pembroke 7th also have theory Z, and the new PMI ATP material also have theory Z. So I'll recommend theory X, theory Y, theory Z. All three questions can come. Then we have Mackland's achievement of affiliation. How Mackland said that people are motivated by power, achievement, or affiliation. If you look at yourself, how you are motivated, type in the chat box. How you are motivated? Are you motivated by power? Atif, I know you already answered that in the our coaching call and also in the batch program. So everyone, please type down how you motivated. I am motivated more by affiliation and achievement, less by power. I don't care about power as per se. So okay, achievement. Priya, San, achievement, what other? Abu Sadi, what? How you are motivated? Arun, I'm reading your answer. Vishnu, good answer. Atif, I know your power. Okay, see, affiliation.
My experience is, yes, my experience is that motivation, hygiene, and obviously achievement, these three are very much important and parallel moves. Because if the resources does not get motivation, and like Heisenberg theory, hygiene conditions, and Maslow hierarchy theory, we need pyramids like needs, families, love, affections, and esteem, and finally achievement. So I think all these three theories, except theory X, which is I think now obsolete. Theory X in our society, it is almost especially from corporate sector, it is obsolete. Theory X, but in certain areas, if we talk in subcontinent like Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, there are in government organization there are X theories.
Sir, we can discuss that thing because in I have worked in multi-billion projects like constructions, so there are a lot of theory X going on there, but that's a topic for another day. Okay, so now a very important thing, the only thing that is left in the resource topic is EQ. EQ is the next best thing in this world. We have been hearing Einstein IQ was 150 and etc etc. Anyone can unmute and tell me what is the most famous picture of Einstein? If you remember
Can you
Einstein,
repeat? Can you repeat?
the most famous picture of Albert Einstein. Can anyone tell me if they have seen? Sorry?
With the tongue out.
With the tongue out. With the tongue out.
Yeah.
You see why? He had a high IQ, but he also have high emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, what is this? It consists of 4 to 5 things. The first thing is, and the most important, understanding yourself. EQ, understand yourself, know yourself. As even Confucius said, know thyself. Knowing yourself is the most important thing. Then, if you know yourself, what is the purpose of knowing yourself if you cannot manage yourself? Manage yourself. How you train yourself to manage in circumstances. Na? For example, let me give you an example. While we were talking, guys, have you seen that all my papers fell down? I have placed actually 13 papers on this whiteboard according to topic wise, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. But all my papers fell down. What I did, I just took another marker, started writing on my whiteboard. And once the topic was ended, I turned the video of ask you guys the question and put 2 papers back. Simple. You know yourself, okay. And then manage yourself. Understanding what things can trigger yourself. Then the third and most important thing, know others. Know others. Understand what motivate them, yaar. What thing motivate Atif? What motivate Liz? What motivate Arun? What motivate Hussain, Naseeb, Madhiya, everyone? What does motivate them? Understand that thing. And then influence them. Understand how to influence them. Every person is motivated by different thing. Every person is motivated by, as many people like put it there, affiliation and all those things. So this is very, very important. Every person is motivated by different scenario. So understand what are you motivated, what other people are motivated them, and then empathy, understanding other people's emotions. That is the key here. Understanding the emotions of other people, how other people's are feeling this thing, understanding their feelings here. And I have to say, guys, we need to work highly on emotional intelligence. By nature, girls are more good at emotional intelligence as compared to guys. But it is intelligence as a skill. This is a skill that can be developed all time. Okay, so know yourself, manage yourself. Know others, manage them or influence them. And empathy is knowing the emotions of the person. A very, very important topic in PMP. So that's complete our people part, 42% of the exam. Stakeholder, communication and resource. So if you have any question, you can put it. Yes, of course, Santosh, we make plans along the way. Or the forming stage, how to hire all those people, that comes under resource management plan. You are right, I missed that. Thank you. Okay, someone asked a question I missed. Just let me see. Problem solving. Difference between compromise and smoothing. Okay, difference between stakeholder and key stakeholder. Okay, so stakeholder can be anyone. There are hundreds and thousands of stakeholders in a big project. Like I have seen I would have stakeholder register for one of the construction project, and we had nearly 700 stakeholders, but only 20 of them were key stakeholders. Stakeholders having high power, high trust, they become the key stakeholder, the decision maker who is gonna give the fund, approve and all those things. And second thing, someone asked, what was the second question? Achievement and recognition, Shibashish. Okay, difference between compromise and smoothing. Okay, compromise is basically you are moving, let's say both parties are here, both parties are moving a little aside. That is a compromising. and compromise become more of a win-win situation. Like problem is solved. Smoothing is more of a, like you are solving the problem temporary and the problem can again come back later on. So that becomes more of a smoothing thing. And in smoothing is more of a lose win towards lose win. Compromise again is considered as win-win situation. Currently, initially PMI has a stance that it was in between, but currently it is considered as the win-win situation. Any other question from resource or a complete people domain? Remember, in your PMP exam, people domain is the most difficult domain. In my experience, process domain is a easy, business environment is only 8%, so people domain is the most difficult thing. Difference and connectivity between work grid, I haven't come to that. Let me come to WBS. Santosh, hold this question and ask it again. Okay, it's a good question what you asked. Anyone else? Any question? Okay, then we can move to the next topic. A very important and my favorite topic. Anyone can write down what is my favorite topic? Let's see how much you know me. You have 5 seconds. What is my favorite topic in PMP? Yep. Abdul Kalim, you are 100% right. Risk management. So, risk is the most important topic in PMP because it's my favorite. So, what is a risk? Risk is simply probability into impact. It's an uncertain event that may or may not happen. Uncertain event may or may not happen. If it has to be uncertain. If uncertainty is removed and it becomes certain, it's not a risk. It becomes issue. And in order to handle an issue, we have issue log. In order to handle issue, we have issue log. So for the risk, it has to be uncertain. Yes, Santosh, you are right. Risk hai to ishq hai. Okay, so I think this is the dialogue of that movie, Hush, that season in which 555 crore, Harshvardhan, something like that. Yeah, Scam 1992. Then you are right. So uncertain event that may or may not happen is a risk. Okay? Uncertain event. Now, how do you know uncertain event? Just like stakeholder, you make risk register. How do you make risk register? Similar as we did in stakeholder. OPS, we go to the past lesson and register what are the risks that are happened, that may happen in the project. You go through the EEF, what are the risks, you ask. Now in risk management, the most important thing is expert judgment. The people who have worked in the past, you ask them, okay, what are the risks that may or may not happen in this particular project, and when they can happen, what is their probability, what is their impact. Apart from that, you also use checklist. So pastel, political, environment, social, technological, legal, and economical. So you, instead of just moving here and there, okay, this can be risk, this can be risk, you get a facilitated workshop, and ask people, okay, what are the political risk? What are the political risk? What risk we can face in this particular project? People will tell you. What are the economical risk? What are the social risk? What are the technological risk? What are the legal risk? And what are the environmental risk? So you get down all the risks. We also have list of VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. You can use that. You can use pastel. You can use TCOP. Pastel is the most used in organization and by PMI. So once you get all the risk, you put it into the risk register. Now at this stage, once you have identified the risk, you have the list of risk there, how they can affect, okay, what is the potential response, who is the potential owner. Every risk must have potential owner. Once you identify the risk, and remember this, just like stakeholder identification, risk identification is an iterative process. It can happen again and again and again. At any time a new risk can be identified. So you rank them. Not all risks are same. I like to give the example. if a high speed cycle strikes you, you may get a little bit injury, but if even a low speed truck strike you, you will be dead. Okay, so you need to rank the risk. In ranking the risk, we have two things: qualitatively, low risk, medium risk, high risk. Just we make the matrix of low, medium, high. It depending from organization to organization, it can be low, medium, high. It can be very low, low, medium, high, very high, whatever the organization is. You rank them. Now from 1,000 of the risk, we have ranked risk into low, medium, high. The next step becomes quantitative risk assessment. So quantitative risk assessment is basically giving number to the risk. How much high, how much low, when we will be able to complete PMP using simulation like Monte Carlo, decision tree, influence diagram, what else, tornado diagram, all these tools to exactly see the value of that risk, how much it can affect us. Once we have ranked the risk qualitatively or quantitatively, now understand this thing, a very critical thing to say: quantitative risk assessment is the only process which we may or may not do in the PMP. Depending upon the project, we may or may not do quantitative risk assessment. Okay, once the quantitative risk assessment is done in the risk register, the next step is to plan their response. What are the response for the risk? Now, risk can be positive as opportunity, or risk can be negative as threat. Most of the time people consider risk as only negative risk, as threat, but PMI classify them both as opportunity and negative and threat. So we have avoiding the risk as a negative risk, we have exploiting the risk, the reverse of this. Then we have mitigate, we have enhance. If the risk is negative, transfer, share, and then we have acceptance in both of the risk. In acceptance have two things, very important. Acceptance is actually the most important in risk planning. In acceptance, you have active acceptance and you have passive acceptance. In active acceptance, you don't take any action. This is critical. In mitigate of risk or avoiding the risk, in avoiding the risk, you are changing your entire plan. You are not doing that task. You are not doing that task. In mitigation, you are doing that, but with the minimum effort. Let's say you want to climb to mountain and at Mount Everest. So avoiding would be not going at all. That is avoiding the risk. Mitigation would be to take a coach with you, take gadgets. Still the risk is there. Transfer would be, maybe I'll send Atif or Hussain instead of myself. That will be transferring the risk. Go ahead and do that thing. Acceptance is that, okay, we don't do anything, we write down the risk. Active acceptance is, okay, if this thing happen, we will do this according to that. Passive acceptance is, we'll see. We will see it all. For active acceptance, we have contingency reserves. The reserves sets for the risk. For passive acceptance, we haven't identified, we don't care about them. Even we have identified, we don't care about them. So we use management reserve for them. Very important thing. So once that is done, let's say a risk occur. What to do? Before a risk has occurred, there's a time before the risk occurred. Once a risk is triggered, there's a time, okay? Proximity, how the risk is close to us. The risk owner implement a risk response plan at that time. Risk owner implement risk response plan at that time. Now, once you implement the risk response plan, two things can happen. Either you get a residual risk, a very low risk that is of very low value, you can maybe accept it, or the second thing becomes secondary risk. Maybe another risk, a high value can occur. Now you need to tackle that risk, residual risk or secondary risk, and you keep monitoring the risk throughout the process. A new risk has identified and all those things, and you do risk audit to check the effectiveness of the process. Please understand this thing. Audit is always to check the effectiveness of the process, how effective that process is. Okay, so you have risk review meeting to see how many reserve is left. You have technical performance to see how risk is affecting all those things. So this is all about risk assessment. If you have any question, please put in the chat box. And people watching on YouTube, I will answer all your questions once this call is ended, because I cannot see YouTube from here. Okay, a very important thing that most of students have asked me regarding the question: when to put it in the risk register, when to put in the issue log, and when to put it into the lesson learned register. You see, if an identified risk, understand this, identified risk occurred, then you update the risk register. If an unidentified risk occurred, that becomes an issue. You put it in the issue log. When you have updated the risk register, or when you have updated the issue log, you have learned the lesson from it. Put it into the lesson learned. Okay, and at the end of the project, put the lesson learned register into lesson learned repository. So what is the difference between risk and fact? Fact is something that will happen, its probability is 100%. Risk is uncertainty. The difference between type of risk: ambiguity risk, variability risk. Pure risk is actually known as hazard, that 100%, it is negative risk. Pure risk is basically negative risk. It has only negative effect on the risk. Please, Atif, mute someone. Sound is coming, please. Pure risk is only negative risk, no positive point from that thing. Ambiguity risk is we are not sure whether this risk will occur or not. So variability is basically range of risk. And when you are making a risk management plan, before identifying the risk, you also need to see whether your organization is risk averse, risk seeker, or risk neutral. Okay, how your organization, you also need to understand your organization before tackling any kind of risk. So all those things, how to use fund of the risk. Yesterday we did a question about that. That is also tackled in the risk management plan. But risk register and risk report. Risk register is a one document that is updated throughout the project. All the risks are there. Risk report is basically a weekly or monthly report that is generated for the risk review meeting, in which you review your risk. Okay, this risk is happening, this risk is happening. Every week or whenever you have risk review meeting, they are changing along the way. Is lockdown is pure risk? I would disagree with lockdown is pure risk. Many people are getting benefit from lockdown, like Food Panda and all those food services, Zoom, they are getting benefit from the lockdown. So you need to see the perspective of a person. From, like, for a construction company, it's a pure risk. For the Food Panda, it's not a pure risk. Assumption log as a source to risk. Yes, assumption log that is made throughout the project. It is made actually along the side of project charter. We use them for risk register. Very important thing. Now everything we use everything basically for the risk register. All the documents that we have in the projects are utilized in order to identify the risk. So that is a very important and key thing to understand. Any other question regarding risk? Guys, any other question regarding risk? Risk is a very important topic. I am moving in PMP direction in such a way that you are getting the most important topic as initial and then the other topic. Just give me a second. I hope I can set that. Okay, so that's all about risk. Now let's go to the topic of quality. Quality is what customer paid for. That is as simple as it gets. If you paid for a higher quality, you get your quality. If you paid for the low quality, you get that thing. Okay, so for quality to be high or low, the quality standards must be agreed between the customers. For example, what is the quality standards of my training program? My quality standards of my training program says that I will guide you, I will coach you till you pass the exam. And you guys know that people have passed the exam in 7 days, and we have people who have passed the exam even in 8 months. Let me tell you a story. One of a student from Laos, he actually joined my program last June. Then he studied from June till August. Then he got busy. Yesterday again I called him, the day before yesterday, and he said that yes, I want to now start it. So I sent him the videos of Agile. That is what quality is. Quality is what the customer paid. So that is what the quality definition is defined by the customer. Okay, I want this thing, these requirement must be present in the project. RBS Madhavan, if you says risk breakdown structure, it is important. RBS, if you say resource breakdown structure, it is important. Okay, so which RBS you are saying? Both have same this. So let's say we benchmark the standards. Mostly when writing the quality, we benchmark the standards. What is benchmarking? We use the quality standards of internal of the organization or external. For example, ISO standard, ISO 9005, 9006, all those are standards which we benchmark. And while making quality management plan, we also see what is the cost of quality. Now, cost of quality is a very important topic for exam. You have cost of conformance and cost of non-conformance. Conformance is the money spent to ensure that all the product you are making, it has quality inside it. It can be testing, documentation, training, all those things. Cost of non-conformance, money spent due to wastage. Now the wastage can be internal and wastage can be external. So very important thing, only one kind of non-conformance is there outside, that is outside the organization, and that is rework. Okay, cost of conformance, cost of non-conformance, all those must be counted in the quality management plan. And in addition to quality management plan, you get your quality metrics, more of a KPI metrics that you need to measure in your project. What are the key performance index? For example, in risk, you can measure how many risks are occurring. In schedule, you can measure there's how many time you are on the time. In scope, you can see how many changes are there. In cost, you can see cost overrun and all those things in your quality thing. So once the quality management plan is agreed between the customer and all those things, then you start building quality product. Very, very important thing. Manage quality happens in execution. It is also known as quality assurance. You are ensuring that all the deliverables that are being produced, they meet your quality standards. If they does not meet your quality standards, these deliverables are not right. You use different tools, checklist, check sheets, control charts, Pareto diagram, 20-80 principle to make sure your process is within the standards. You use histogram and so many other tools to ensure that all those things that you are meeting is according to the quality management plan. You get quality control measurements, quality reports. Quality reports goes to the control quality, who checks that whether your deliverable that has been produced. Now the job of control quality. Job of the control quality is to check the deliverables that you have made. Do they meet the quality standards or not? The deliverables that you have made, do they meet quality standards or not? If they don't meet quality standards, they are not quality deliverables. So very important thing. Once the deliverable is checked by quality, passed through inspection. In control quality we have inspection. In managed quality we have audit. Through inspection they check those deliverables whether they passed or not. So we get verified deliverable. Verified deliverable means deliverables that have been passed by the quality department. Deliverables that has been passed by quality department, not client, by quality department. Now it may or may not meet the quality requirement of the client, but it meets the quality standards that were agreed in the quality management plan. And of course, if the deliverable does not meet, so we have Ishikawa diagram as a root cause analysis diagram to do the root cause analysis. We also do 5 why to identify the reasons, and we use Pareto chart, the 80-20 principle, to see which are the most defects, and we get quality control measurement in this way. Understand this thing, that quality is all about meeting the customer standards. Something can be of high quality but low grade, and something can be low quality but high grade. Quality is not always depending on the grade. Another concept to understand is precision and accuracy. Let's say this is bullseye. What is precision? Precisions are that how much readings are near to each other. How much readings are near to each other. That is precision. Accuracy is how much you are near the target. how much you are near the target. Some students have 1 or 2 questions in the exam regarding precision and accuracy, so that is important. Okay, grade. Let's say you want to eat a chicken steak. You went to eat a chicken steak. Now that is considered as a high grade meal. That's an expensive meal. It's considered high grade meal, but it does not meet your standard. You ask it spicy. For example, whenever I go somewhere, so I ask for spicy. If it's not spicy, then it does not meet that standard. Actually, let me give you an example of yesterday. Me and my wife went to some place, and we were coming back. We stopped at a dahi bhalle shop. So it's like dahi bhalle. So it's, you can say, like a fruit chaat and something, like, if you don't understand dahi bhalle. So I asked for a spicy one, and my wife asked for less spicy. When he gave her the spicy one and gave me the less spicy one. So I asked more spicy. I was putting spicy in my dahi bhallas, and my wife was saying it is unable to eat. Then I checked that one, that has been shifted. What has happened? The grade was okay. It was considered a good dahi bhallas, but the quality standards of the customers were not met. I hope that is grade and quality is clear to you now. Any other question in the quality topic? Very important topic. So far we have covered resource, stakeholder, communication, risk, quality. Any question within any topic? Okay, then we move to next topic, and next topic is procurement. Procurement, in my opinion, if you understand, it becomes the most easy topic if you understand the flow. If you don't understand the flow, procurement can become a very difficult topic. First thing, you need to decide whether to make or buy, and you do the make or buy criteria on understanding this thing. Okay, so if we make or sell, will it be cheap, will it be good quality, all those things. If we buy it, or will it be cheap, inexpensive, all those things. So once you decided, okay, I'm gonna buy, then you need to select your source selection criteria. What is my source selection criteria? Maybe the past experience becomes your source selection criteria, the past lesson learned, the cheap cost to quality. What is your source selection criteria? Once you have defined the source selection criteria, which type of contract you want to have. Now for the contract, understand this thing. If your scope is fixed, you can have fixed price contract. If your scope is fixed, you have a fixed price contract. Like we do in the construction, I gave someone, okay, make this house, so they have a fixed price contract. The contract between you guys and me is actually a fixed price. We give a fixed price, and we say that, okay, your scope was clear, I want to clear PMP. So scope is clear, we have fixed price contract. Now sometimes we give to our vendor or seller, okay, I want to complete this house earlier. If you complete the house earlier, I will give you incentive. So that becomes fixed price incentive fee. And then we also have in long contracts, according to the inflation we match, that becomes fixed price economic price adjustment. Fixed price economic price adjustment contract. So it is an important contract to understand. Let's say your scope is not fixed. So then you have cost plus fixed fee. Cost reimbursement plus fixed fee. You go to a mechanic, the mechanic says that, okay, your tire needs to be replaced. This actually happens many times. You go to a mechanic, your tire, maybe your air is less in the car. You say, okay, please fill the air, and the mechanic says that your tire needs to be replaced. So if that case, and he says that, okay, the tire costs this much, and this will be my charges. Cost reimbursement plus fixed fee. Okay, we also have cost reimbursement and incentive fee, cost reimbursement and award fee. The difference between incentive fee and award fee is that incentive fee is basically agreed between the team. Incentive fee is basically agreed between the person, and that, okay, if you do that, I will pay you this much of amount. Award fee is more like a tip. Then we have time and material contract. when you want to rent some services, car, jeep or services, we rent by the hour basis, so we have time and material. Santosh, which specific contract is not clear? I can repeat that contract for you. Okay, so once you have finalized which third type, can you write down, Santosh? Please clarify the question in order to save the time. Okay, so once you have write down the contract, the next thing become procurement statement work. Procurement statement work. What is procurement statement of work? In procurement statement of work, we write down each and everything regarding that. What do we need? What do we need in the project? Like for example, we say that okay, I need a 400 square feet house that will have these many rooms, these many bathrooms, the electric wire should be of this company, the air condition should be this company, and I want in this time, in this cost, everything that you need, you write down in your procurement statement of work. Once that is written, then you advertise it to the market. You advertise it to the, okay, everyone can basically now give their contract, and when the vendors or seller, they provide you with their proposals, you have seller proposal and you do bidder conference. You invite all of them and elaborate them, okay, what is expected from us, what you can expect from here. All the requirements are clarified between each party, and then they provide their final proposals. You have negotiation. Very important that in the negotiation regarding the money, regarding the dollars, the project manager does not take part. We have a separate department of either a legal department or a procurement department that is handling the money things. But quality, scope, cost, project manager is there for negotiation. So in negotiation, project manager is not leading in the term of money. We have a procurement department, but quality and all those things, project manager is leading that. Once agreement is finalized, we have agreement between the parties. Now, once the agreement is signed, it is everything. Okay, you have procurement statement of work before the agreement, that was important. You also have procurement management plan that is giving you the maybe a list of the sellers that can be used. You can have a procurement strategy, how to handle the procurement and all those things. So, but once the agreement is written, then this becomes the most important thing, how you are going to handle all those things. Now, if you want to audit, let's say you want to audit the seller, if you want to audit, this must be written in the agreement. If it is not written in the agreement, you cannot audit the seller. Very important and key point to understand. Okay, let's say in agreement it is written, now the deliverables are coming, you do the inspection of deliverables. Now in inspection, either you can accept, if you accept it, end of story, contract is closed. If you reject, now you have rejected it, now what happened? Now the problem has arisen, now there is a dispute. How to handle a dispute? The first thing is, try to do the same thing, collaboration and confronting all those things to get the win-win situation. If you cannot do, then the next step would be to what is written in the contract. What is written in the contract? If something is happening that is not written in the contract, then the next step would be alternate dispute resolution. And even in the alternate dispute resolution, is the first thing is go to a mediator, a third party who can solve your problem, and the last thing is go to the court. Going to the court is never preferred by any party, because if you go to the court, actually it is not beneficial for anyone. And once all this done, you close the procurement, you send the documents to the project updates. That's it about procurement. If you have any question, put down in the chat box. Santosh, fixed price, economic price adjustment. So Santosh, what happened in the long contracts? In the long contracts, you normally change the price according to the inflation. Inflation can be dependent on the gold price. Maybe the price of cement has risen from 55 rupees to 255. Now the contract is not valid. So in the long terms contract, we have a clause of inflation that is called as economic price adjustment contract. Procurement statement of work is also considered in creating project charter. No, procurement statement of work is not considered. You see, understand this thing. All other knowledge areas are between the project team and all those things. This is outside. As we know, stakeholders are internal and external. This is external thing. Maybe you can have like, okay, all the project is need to done outsourced, then you can write down that thing in there. But procurement statement of work is not basically considered while considering the project charter. What about seller conference? I written here that once they give the seller proposals, then you have a negotiation in between them, that is bidder conference. So Ibrahim, we call them as a bidder conference instead of seller conference. When they give you their contract, in order to negotiate with them, in order to clarify the requirement, you have seller conference. Will fixed price award fee comes in fixed price? No. We have fixed price incentive fee, fixed price economic price adjustment. We don't have award fee in fixed price. What happens when work is completed but seller raise claim after completion? Now, why he raised the claim? What is the purpose of that claim? Now, that depends from scenario to scenario. Let's say seller raised the claim, I have not received the payment. Then you need to, this is not the job of the project manager, but he can facilitate to check whether he has received the invoice or not invoice. Which type of claim has been there? There can be thousands of claims. So Hussain, the question needs to be defined. What type of claim? If the deliverable has been delivered by seller, then the contract can be closed before close the yes. Actually, if the deliverable is agreed, contracts are closed before closing of the project. I read the question. I will let me complete all the predictive topic. I will come to the agile. Then I will answer the agile contracts. Though it's a very small topic, I'll come to that. Hussain, please clarify your question. That question is very important. Anyone else? Any question from procurement? Okay. After this, I'm going to business environment. I guess business environment is already clear. It's just a mixture of all these topics. Only compliance was important. Okay. My question was extended by Sanger. Okay. So Hussain, I can move forward. Okay. Thank you. So the next topic and the most important topic, I would say, sometimes become, not anymore, how three baselines are created. When I say baseline, it is basically scope, schedule, cost. Now, what do you do there? First of all, you collect the requirements. All the requirements through requirement management plan. Like using requirement management plan, you use so many tools and technique to collect the requirement. Prototyping, a very good tool to use requirement. Focus group, asking the people what are their requirements. Context diagram, observation, job shadowing, all those techniques you use to collect the requirement. You get requirement documentation describing what are the functional requirement, non-functional requirement, solution requirement. All types of different requirements are defined by requirement documentation, and you get requirement traceability matrix. A matrix that links all the requirement is basically requirement traceability matrix. So let's say we get all the requirements. Now we have the requirements. Now we need to refine which requirement will go into the project and which will not go it. So all requirements come there. So we put scope filter using scope management plan. So we get, maybe we can use Moscow, all those techniques, and we get, from here we get project scope statement. Now project scope statement is one of the most important thing in your project. Why? What is in the project scope statement? Acceptance criteria. What is included in the project, excluded in the project, assumption, constraint, everything that is in the project scope statement will come in the project. Anything that is not in the project scope statement will not come into your project. So you make project scope statement. Once project scope statement is done, then you break down the work. You make WBS. Okay? You make WBS. And in order to understand WBS, we have WBS dictionary. What this 1.1 means, what this 1.112 means, this code of identifiers. That is, we have printouts dictionary that explain what is the relationship between these things and all those things. The combination of project scope statement, WBS and WBS dictionary, it is called scope baseline. Hassan, is RAM and part of WBS? What is RAM? I am not familiar. Work breakdown. Everything, all the work is actually the part of WBS. Any work that is not included in it will not be done. So there is a rule known as rule of 100%. When you add the entire WBS, it becomes the 100% of the work. If it is not, then it is not. According to the founder of PMP, Lee Lombardi, we had a podcast, me and Lee Lombardi. So he said that there are two things every project manager must know. One is to make the work breakdown structure, the entire work, how to divide that work. So responsibility assignment matrix, RAM and RESI, you can use with the WBS, but you use them in the resource calendar, resource management plan, and you use them while you are scheduling the activity along the project schedule, and the document is created. It is not the part of WBS, it's an entirely different thing, responsibility assignment matrix. Thank you, Hassan and Sibashish, for that. So you have made your scope baseline. Now very important thing is to control your scope. Validate scope, control your scope, so that we don't have scope creep. Scope creep is basically any kind of change that like customer says, please do also this, please do also this. No. If you want to do anything, if you want to change anything, you need to come through the change control procedure. We have a complete formal change control procedure for that. So that is basically, for that we have the entire procedure, that whatever the question is, it comes to there. Okay, so scope creep, need to avoid it. The second thing is gold plating. The example of gold plating is very good. The customer paid for Mehran, a cheap car, and you gave him Toyota. Or for the international audience, the customer paid you Toyota and you are giving him Lexus. Okay, so that is called gold plating, giving more feature than it was agreed to. PMI is against that. We don't do gold plating, only deliver what is agreed. And then if the customer accept the deliverable become accepted deliverable. So let me give you a deliverable journey. You guys know I love to make journey of everything, flow of everything. So a deliverable is made in execution. The deliverable goes to control quality. If the control quality verifies the deliverable becomes verified deliverable. If it rejects it, it goes as a change request to change control board, and we can have preventive, corrective action or defect repair. If the quality says okay, that is verified, that becomes verified deliverable, then it goes to validate scope. Okay, so in validate scope, the customer, we do inspection and audit with the customer accept the deliverable, it becomes accepted deliverable. Accepted deliver, the customer has accepted deliverable. Then this accepted deliverable goes to closing of project. Deliverable, control quality, validate scope, accepted deliverable, close the project as a final product. Okay, so deliverable journey is very important to understand. Okay, so once we have made this work breakdown structure, the lowest part of work breakdown structure is called work package. This highest one is known as, this is deliverable, this is control account. If you have in between a section, that is called planning package. The lowest part was work package. Now what do? Then we define, this was a work package, the entire work package to deliver. Then we decompose this work package further to get activity list, activity attributes, and milestone list. Milestone list is a list of the highest deliverable. Most of the time milestones are contractually obligation. They have a zero duration, but they are contractually obligation. We are decomposing it by following schedule management plan. We are decomposing it by following schedule management plan. How the schedule is gonna go through, which schedule you use, what is the tolerance of the schedule. Okay, so once we have activity list, it's a list of all the activity attributes. Is just like work breakdown structure dictionary, that is telling what are the dependencies, what is the relationship, and all those things. So as I am talking about dependencies, there are 4 type of dependencies: internal and external. In internal, we have mandatory dependency, it has to be done this way, and discretionary dependency, preferred practices. And mandatory is called as hard logic, that it has to be done this way. Discretionary is called as soft logic, preferred practices, whatever you feel preferred practices. Same for external, internal dependency as well as external dependencies. Internal dependency as well as external dependencies. Then we have 4 type of logical relationship between 2 activities. Let's say we have activity A and activity B. We can have finish to start, this activity ends, then this starts. Finish to finish, start to start, between predecessor and successor, and finish to start, start to finish. 4 type of logical relationship: finish to finish, start to start, start to finish, and finish to start. And then we have leads and lag. Let's say lead is basically activity A and activity B. Activity A was supposed to end, then B was supposed to start. But now there's a lag because of any resources or whatever the thing, the B is not starting. So we say that the activity B's successor activities lagged. And in this scenario, if the B started before, this is called leading the activity. This is called leading the activity. So lead and lag, mandatory dependencies, and relationship. Very important thing in the terms of scheduling. So let's say we have made all those things, all activity, all the relationship. Then we make, guys, tell me something. If I write down something here, is it visible or not? Write down in chat box. Is it, if I'm writing something there, or it is okay? So not okay. So once you have made all those things and you have relationship, then you made a network diagram. Relationship between those things. Okay. This activity start. This is end. This is network diagram, and the process what you get in the end is called project schedule network diagram, or also known as Pasand. Okay. So now with the help, if you have their durations, we know how to calculate the durations. There are 3 to 4 methods to calculate the duration of any activity. The first one is analogous. We use the previous data. If I completed something in, for example, I said that this coaching call will be completed in 2 hours. I said this to everyone. Why? I have done this thing 8 times before in this years. So I use the same data. I'm gonna do almost the same thing. Of course, a little bit changing. So that I give the approximate estimation, that is 2 hours. That is analogous estimation. Analogous estimation. Parametric estimation is using the parameters, maybe of the past. Okay, it's also using the parameters of the past. We made the house 200 square feet in past in 6 months. Now we are gonna make 400 square feet. So we can say, okay, we can make it 1 year, and so on and so on. Then very important, bottom up estimation. We add the activities from bottom and we move it to the above. Bottom up estimation, very effective in costing. 4th one is 3-point estimation: optimistic, pessimistic, and most likely. We have 2 in 3-point estimation: triangular distribution, optimistic, pessimistic, most likely. Okay, and beta distribution, optimistic. So if the question says to use triangular distribution, we will use it. Otherwise, we will use beta distribution, also known as PERT. So we have duration of it. We add all the duration. Let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, 4. Okay. If the question says calculate the critical path, no one has seen the question of critical path so far. But if you get the question, what is the critical path? Just add them. 5 plus 6 plus 8 plus 4. So this becomes certain duration of 5. Or please tell me which is the critical path. Write down in the chat box. You have 30 seconds, guys. Which is the critical path? Without calculating, tell me the critical path. Hussain, I didn't ask the duration. I asked the critical path. Yeah, A, C, D, E. There is 6, there is 7, so this becomes the critical path. The one having the longest duration is the critical path. Path with the longest duration. So since this 5 plus 7, 12, 12 plus 8, 20, 20, 24, that will be 23. So this activity can be delayed by one duration. So that is called as float. Float is the amount how much an activity can be delayed without delaying the critical path. So you get float. Then as a result you have your schedule baseline. When you made all the duration with according to the activity, you can get a Gantt chart, you can get a milestone list, you get a network diagram, you get scope baseline, schedule baseline. Now, two important concepts to understand here is crashing and fast tracking. Crashing is basically adding more resource to the activity. So once you add more resource, that is called crashing, and as a result of crashing your cost goes up. Then we have fast tracking, doing the activities that were in series into parallel. Activities that were in series, doing them parallel. So that does decrease the duration, but as a result of that, what happen, your basically risk increases. The risk of that project gets increasing. Crashing, fast tracking. Then sometime what is happen, a resource is very important. So you have to manage your schedule according to the resource. So we have resource leveling and resource smoothing. In resource leveling, let's say this is the schedule, we level the resource. We level it. When we level the resource, all resources are managed, but the schedule get increased. The schedule get increased because we are managing according to the resource, and they may have to increase work more. So as a result, the schedule can get increased. In resource smoothing, we don't allow schedule to get increased, we play in between. We don't allow schedule to get increased, we play in between. So this is all about scheduling. We have gone through scope, we have gone through schedule, we get the schedule baseline. For crashing, we need change. Hassan, I'll come, just give me 2 minutes. Let me complete the costing one, then I'm coming to this one topic. Costing is just like scheduling. You get a cost management plan, you decide which type of currency you are using, you estimate the cost using the same tools and technique, and how do you measure the costing thing and scheduling thing? Where do you stand in the schedule? Okay, second thing which Leland Barty said is important for project is to make network diagram. Okay, where do you stand in the costing? A very important thing. So for that, we make this diagram: time, cost, planned value, actual cost, and earned value. From there, we get two important formula: schedule variance, which is earned value minus planned value, cost variance, earned value minus actual cost, SPI, that is EV divided by PV, CPI, EV divided by AC. If it is 0, it is 1, that we are on schedule and within the budget. If it is less than 1, like 0.8 or in minus, it's a bad thing. If it is greater than 1, it's a good thing. These questions will come in your exam. Greater than SPI, less than SPI, equal to this question will come in your exam. This is important. Then another thing, a very important thing, how do you calculate, like let's say this was your entire budget and completion. Your budget has changed. You have new budget, estimate at completion. Two ways to calculate estimate at completion: actual cost plus estimate to complete, or simply dividing budget at completion by CPI, cost performance index. Okay, the two ways to calculate it. So while you are on the costing, you need to understand how you are financing your project, who is financing your project, what is funding limit reconciliation, how the funding limit correlates with your project. You need to understand, okay, you did this thing, you get the budget. And bottom up estimation is called as cost, bottom up estimation is called cost aggregation. Sebastian, we don't need to use other formulas of EAC. We always use this formula. The PMBOK 6 had those formulas. They are not relevant anymore. PMI ATP material only have these two formulas. This formula is used for only one. This formula is used only to calculate estimate to completion. If you want to calculate estimate at completion, you will always use this formula. Okay. Now, very important thing, you get your cost baseline, you get your schedule baseline, you get your scope baseline. All these three baseline combined, they are called as performance measurement baseline. Performance measurement baseline. Okay, a very important thing. Now, one last thing in costing. Okay, let's say these are your activity cost and this is their contingency reserve. This is work package, it has this contingency reserve, and all the work packages combined are called control account. Now, activity cost, all the activity plus contingency reserves, all them are called as cost baseline. Cost baseline plus management reserve. This is called project budget. So these management reserves are not the part of cost baseline. If you want to use these management reserve, you need to get a change request. You need to go and follow change control procedures. Yes, guys, please, if you have any questions regarding all these topics, scope, schedule, cost, you can ask now. Okay, while I put the papers. Okay, for crashing, we need change request or not? Hassan, as a general situation, for crashing, we do need change request. But if by doing crashing was planned, like if this happens, we will do that, then we don't need the change request. Change request is only needed for the management reserve. If by doing crashing, we do not exceed our contingency reserves, then we do not need change request. Okay. When change requests are required and when not. Shubhashish, I already answered the question. When you need management reserve, when you need to change your cost, scope baseline, schedule baseline, cost baseline, then you need your change request. S-curve, yes, you can call this as S-curve, and it is used as curve. We basically called S-curve, that is produced by Monte Carlo analysis. Okay, any other question? Path with the longest duration. Management reserves are a total of 5. Hassan, that depends on your cost management plan and organizational enterprise environmental factors and all those things. It is not compulsory that it is always 5 to 10% of the entire budget. It depends from organization to organization, or project to project. Any other question? Okay, so we have integration. Integration is combining all those things. Then we have closing. I'll come to the closing later on. Okay, let's. What is this? What is Lee Lambartri? He is the founder of PMP. I was just mentioning is that he considered that work breakdown structure, and if a project manager is unable to make a work breakdown structure and is unable to make sequencing of the activities, is not a project manager. I was just giving his opinion. That's not important for PMP exam here. Okay, now let's come to the agile. If anyone has no question, let me see. We have few questions on YouTube. I'll come back later on. Okay, guys. So when to use agile and when not to use agile. Let's say these are requirements and these are certainty. If your requirements are 100% clear and you are certain how to do that, then you use predictive or traditional environment. If your requirements are not clear at all, you don't know what to do and you are not certain at all what to do, this is called chaos. You don't have project at all. But if you are a little bit sure, okay, you are quite sure about your requirement, a little bit sure how to make this, here we use hybrid project, and in this area we use adaptive, you can say agile or lean process. This is Stacy diagram when to use agile team. And if you get a question in the PMP exam, your organization is moving from predictive to agile. Why they are moving from predictive to agile? Is the environment is changing, or are you gonna use the philosophy of agile to lean? That is very critical to understand. In agile we have 4 values. All of you knows that. The important thing is agile mindset. Why do we need agile mindset? Agile mindset is that we accept the change request, we accept the customer collaboration. That collaborating with the customer is the most important thing. Giving value to the customer through minimum viable product, through minimum marketable feature is the key of the project, is the most important thing. We don't care about whether the change is coming now or not. We want to give value to the customer. That is agile must. The customer is most important, and we will give value through iteratively and incrementally. That is the mindset of agile. And in agile, you become a servant leader. The project is the most important thing to you. Then the team is most important thing. You let the team work themselves. You use osmotic communication. You use co-located areas. You grow the team. You empower the team. You help the team. We use task board, Kanban board as information radiators in the project. All these are basically mindsets of agile, how the things are. The most popular framework of agile is Scrum. And how do basically Scrum work? I'll show it in two different ways. Let's say the first thing is we have a project vision, the high level thing, what we want to basically do in the project. Then you get product roadmap, then you have releases, okay. Then in release we have iterations, then we have daily stand-ups and all those things, okay. In Scrum we have three different roles. Scrum is the most important, and you will get most of the question regarding that and this area, agile mindset and servant leadership. Product owner, Scrum master and development team. So all the requirements product owners collect from the customers, from the stakeholder. He's the voice of customer. He put down all the requirements in the form of user stories, 3 C's: card, confirmation and conversation. We get the all user story. As a user, I want this so that this can happen. As a user, I want this. This is defining the role. This is defining what is your requirement. I want this, so that is defining your acceptable criteria. We get all the requirement and we put them into the product backlog. Once all the requirements are in the product backlog, the product owner goes back to the customer and asks them to prioritize them by high value and high risk. So we use Moscow 100-point voting techniques to prioritize our product backlog. We can use Monopoly and other techniques. Whatever the reason is, we prioritize the product backlog. Once we get a prioritized product backlog, high value, high risk, high value, medium risk, and so on and so on. Then the team comes, the team puts story points on it. The team puts story points through ideal time, ideal hours, or affinity diagram, or story, or the Fibonacci series, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 story points there. And from their story points, once the story points are there, the team makes sprint backlog. Scrum Master is facilitating the meeting. The team make the sprint backlog by discussing with the product owner that as this is our estimated velocity, understand this thing. Team decide what their estimated velocity will be. Team decide the story point, and the team is self-organizing, self-sufficient, cross-functional, T-type leadership. They know how to do their task. Job of Scrum Master is a servant leader. So once the sprint backlog is approved by product owner, it is communicated the sprint goals to the product, and then the team started working on it. The team may divide the stories into tasks. If the stories are large, like epic, we divide them in user stories, and we can divide them in tasks. Then we do daily stand-ups. The sprint can be 1 to 4 weeks. Normally it is 2 weeks. Sprint and iteration are both same name. We can call it sprint backlog or iteration backlog. Then we have daily stand-up, in which 3 questions are asked: what you did yesterday, what you are doing today, and is there any impediment, roadblocks, risk. So basically the stand-up happen for 15 minutes at the same time, at the same location, to see the status of the progress. This is basically a status meeting, nothing else. If there's a risk you want to discuss in detail, you have a follow-up meeting. So we can have a burn up chart, burn down chart to see the progress. We can have a risk burn down chart, we can have task board, and we can have a Kanban board. Kanban board is a board that has work in progress limitation. Kanban is also a methodology. If you use Kanban board in Scrum, it becomes Scrum ban. Okay, Kanban works on the pull methodology. You are pulling the work in Kanban. You are pulling the user stories. and let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. There is a work in progress limit of 1. Only one user story can be work here. Unless it is completed, it cannot be moved to the next phase. Once you have completed the sprint, we have sprint review. Sprint review is where basically you demo the product owner, you show them what you have done. If you have completed your user story 100% according to the definition of done and acceptance criteria, then you will bring those user stories there. If you haven't completed your user story, you will not bring those user story there, because in agile we don't have 99% completed. Either it is 100% or it is not completed at all. So if the user story is accepted, good, it goes forward. If it is not, it goes back to the product backlog. A product owner or stakeholders can add more user stories here. Here is a process where you you do the product backlog grooming or refining of the product backlog. Okay, so all user stories are added here. So once this is done for every sprint, we have sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective is basically where the team sit together to see how they are doing, what are the things they have done right, what they have done wrong, and all those things. Sprint retrospective have 5 stages. Set the stage, like you are understanding why we are here, what is the purpose of this meeting. Gather data, we are gathering data about the entire sprint. Generate insight, we are doing a root cause analysis, why, fishbone diagram. Decide what to do, smart goals and all those things, and closing the retrospective to end the retrospective, how this workshop has been done. And we keep on doing this thing unless the product is completed. So this is all about Scrum in summary. Guys, whatever the questions you have, keep typing it. I'll come back to all those questions. Then we have XP, the second most used methodology in Agile. So XP is basically extreme programming, 2 programmers working together, one mentor, one apprentice. We call it as pair programming. We do continuous integration. We have test driven development. The test is written, then we work on this. And we do refactoring. Refactoring is basically like housekeeping, simplifying the product. Red, green, refactor. First the problem was red, then green, then refactor. You do the continuous integration. We don't have product owner in XP, we have customer actually working in there with us in XP. Then we have lean. Lean is actually the father of agile. The agile comes from lean. Lean is all about removal of waste, all about amplifying learning, all about deciding at the last responsible moment. We make value stream mapping in the lean, in which we see what are the value added, what are the non-value added tasks, what is the productivity, throughput, what is the cycle time to complete something when you started working on it, what is lead time, the time the customer requested and the time it completed. All those things come under lean. So guys, I think that's all about agile. If you have any question, you can ask here. Otherwise, we have 2 more topics. We have first we have journey of change request, and then we have journey closing the project. And very important thing, agile contracting is a very simple thing. In agile, we can have any type of contract. We can have fixed price per user story, fixed price per work package. We can have graduated work price. We can have customized contract, contract according to the customer. Any type of contracting can be there in agile. So if you have any question, guys, please put in the comment. If you understand 100% of what I said in agile, please put yes, I understand 100%. Graduated contract is as we move forward, we modify the contract at any time. Muhammad Al Ghamdi, I am happy that you understand 100%. Hussain, good. And there are more than 30 people here, so I need more yes. Okay, yes. I need interaction, guys. More interaction. S. Santosh from your side. Okay. Madhvan, thank you. Good. People at YouTube, are you understanding it? Great work ethics. Ajmal, great work ethics in YouTube. What does this mean? Okay. So what is the difference between definition of done? Definition of done is a checklist that the team has, that okay, before going to the customer, we need to check these things are present there or not. Definition Definition of done is there. Definition of ready is basically, okay, this is completed, now we can go through and check the checklist. Definition of ready comes first, then definition of done, then the customer have the acceptance criteria. Okay. Okay guys, so last two topic we have discussed change request in detail, although in my change request journey, but one more time, remember more than 10 question comes for change request in your exam. So let's say change comes to the product owner, product owner. The change can be in agile and change can be in predictive. The change comes to the product owner. The product owner evaluates the change and see if this change is giving value to the customer. If the change is giving value to the customer, he put directly into the product backlog. If the change is very important, it's very important, it can actually make the product obsolete. If we don't do the change, then the product owner can even put in the current sprint that change. If that can wait, you put it a high priority for next sprint. If it is low priority, you may put it in the bottom of the product. So very straightforward, change come, we put the change according to the priority. If change come in predictive environment, project manager receives the change in change log, and if the change is important, okay, so he does the impact analysis, scope, schedule and cost, whether this change is important or this change is not important. So if whether it is affecting the deliverable, affecting the baselines or not. If it is not affecting the deliverables, so he rejected the change and communicated to the people. If it is affecting the deliverable, he did a detailed analysis and sent to the change control board. So in the last video I said that minor, major or moderate. So whatever the change is, that change control board will approve or deny it. Everyone is the part of the change control board. Once the change control board approved it, if deny it, we again communicate. If approved it, we update the change log, we update the documents, we communicate, build the change, then we implement the change, rebalance the baselines and again communicate, and this process continue. So that is the change request procedure as a general. Let's say if a customer has requested a change, then there is a slight change here. If a customer requested a change, the PM directly evaluate the change and tell back to the customer, hey, because of that change, the schedule can increase, the cost can increase. Do you want that change? The customer says, yes, we want the change. Then it follows the same procedure. The customer says no, end of story. So that's a change control procedures. Okay. First rebalance, then communicate to the stakeholders. Communication happens here, then rebalancing, and then again rebalancing happens there. Okay. And now the last topic. Let's say the work is done. Now we come to the closing. Closing, everything that you have made in the project comes to the closing. Your business documents, business case, benefit management plan, your project charter, your procurement documents, your project documents, your project management plan, which is a combination of all plan, comes to the closing. Your accepted deliverable, that deliverables are accepted. Okay, the deliverables come, deliverables come, accepted deliverable. The first thing, the accepted deliverable becomes final product and give it to the customer as a first thing. Accepted deliverable gets given to the customer as in the transition period. You start doing the variance analysis to the meeting, regression analysis. You start writing the lesson learned. You start updating the documents and start writing final report. Once final report is ready, you show it to the sponsor. If the sponsor approves the final report, you communicate the final report according to the communication management plan. Then once all the documents are updated, you archive the documents. Once the lesson register is written, you update the lesson register. Once all this work is done, then you release the team, not before. Then you release the team, then you close the contract, and finally you celebrate. Finally you celebrate. Remember this thing, celebration is the part of closing. So guys, that's the entire PMP in less than 2 hours again. So my analogous estimation was right. I hope that was valuable to you. Now let me answer your questions. Okay, after change control board, what happens? After change control board, if the change request is approved, then you update the change log and you communicate to the stakeholders. Then you start implementing the change request. Once implemented the change request, you rebalances the baseline, your plans are updated, so you communicate again. Okay, when the change request comes, doesn't the PM check for alternative before conductive impact analysis? You see, when we are saying the impact analysis, these are alternatives. We are considering all those options, option analysis, and all those things are happening here. Okay, let me see, guys. If you have more questions about anything in PMP, please answer. Let me open the YouTube and answer their question. Risk assessment means assessing the risk. Workaround if an unidentified risk occur, so we do the workaround for that. Workaround means you haven't identified, you are planning something else. It's like a jugaad, Vijay. Verifying data, how much the reliable data is, can you explain? Abdul Fazil, can you clarify your question? Risk, okay. Shuharai is the part of ACP and not the PMP. When we enter the issue log and I answer this question, when risk occurred, what happened, I answered it. Parkinson's law, I didn't answer that one. So Parkinson's law says that the time expands according to your availability. You see, I limited it to 2 hours. I said I'm gonna complete in 2 hours. So according to Parkinson's law, I compressed this thing. If I haven't mentioned I will do in 2 hours, maybe I can expand it accordingly. You also have student syndrome, that students wait at the last responsible moment to do anything. Because of my coaching system, you guys are not suffering from student syndrome. Otherwise, you will be waiting. Now, maybe you are waiting to work when I ask you message update the status, but student syndrome is not working. Is there any role for Scrum Master with change? Not, Ibrahim, not so much. Scrum Master can communicate to the product owner or can facilitate, but not as per se. Okay. So, any other question? Any other question apart from saying me complete revise the entire PMP again? Difference between connectivity between work breakdown structure and risk breakdown structure, resource breakdown structure. So the thing is that we see what are the works. Okay, this is the work, these are the works, and these are the resources available. So we see who will do that task. From the work breakdown structure dictionary and activity attributes, basically we assign them. So that is the only relationship between them. Okay. So guys, any other question that you would like? And now, batch 10, you remember I said that we will do A/B testing. We will do net promoter score at the end of your batch. Now put your net promoter score personally to me. Not, I don't want to make it as a herd mentality. Send me net promoter score personally. I want to see now how can I further improve. And guys, like always, especially batch 10 and 1-to-1 and anyone on watching on YouTube, do recommend me how can I further improve, how I can add value to your life. Okay, I received answer from 2 people. I need the entire people. Okay, 3 people have answered me. Okay, we are closing it on YouTube. Thank you very much from YouTube. Okay, I need,
Recording stopped.
guys, I have stopped recording. I need this feedback from you.